start our brief public meeting where we go over our minutes and just a little bit of business, and then we're going to open the closed hearing and we'll finish, or at least start our deliberations. And maybe we can wrap this up tonight, I'm not sure. So I need a motion to open the public portion of the meeting.
I so move, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the meeting's open. And the first order of business is to accept the minutes from the last meeting. Does anyone have any corrections? I need a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll motion.
Okay, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I now need a motion to, I guess, close the public portion of the meeting and move to the open but closed portion.
I move that we close the open meeting and move into the closed. Open. Yeah. Close the public meeting and
open the closed meeting. Second.
I'll second that.
And this we need a roll call. Judy?
Aye.
Aye.
Pete?
Aye.
Aye. The chair. So where we left this off last week, we had a question about some information, and we've considered carefully all of the public comments, all the technical comments. We've had attorneys working for the town help us make determinations on some of the finer points. So we have a little more discussion, but not a lot. And then we're going to go over kind of a hit list and see if we can come to some sort of before I get into this, do we have anything we want to discuss? Good.
Do you want to finish up? We were following the appellant's points, and we had a couple of those left.
Sure, yeah, we can do those. You want to take the lead on that?
I
Did you have
can.
the paper?
I think we were on item 7, which is on page 20. The issue of shooting within 500 feet of the neighboring property structures. And so the appellant's claim is that the proposed shooting range is within 500 feet of the neighbor's shed and propane tank. I guess the code, the appellant cites the code right in the section here, or it's the New York State law, it's not a town law. 500 feet for a firearm, 250 feet for a crossbow, 150 feet for a bow, within proximity of a dwelling, a farm building or structure, an occupation, or use unless you own it, lease it, or an immediate member of the family, an employee, or have the owner's consent. So I guess the issue is whether, well, certainly whether a shed and a propane tank qualify under that language, if they are, in fact, within 500 feet of the shooter, of where the shot takes place.
But wasn't it an occupied dwelling?
Well, as I read it, it's a, dwelling, house, farm building, we don't have that case. Structure and occupation, which to me means a business or a place where somebody undertakes an enterprise as part of their living.
Well, we have to go out to get our lawnmower out of there
and our rototiller.
I think this is a closed session.
Okay,
Yeah.
nobody else better speak then.
So, just to address it, going out to get your lawnmower is not an occupation. If somebody were repairing cars in that shed as an occupation, then it would be a place of
I
occupation.
realize that, but we will be in the shed on the weekends doing our work. We work out there
As
too.
you move around the rest of the property, but that 500-foot requirement doesn't require those things. It's dwelling, farm building, place of occupation.
For structure.
Structure and occupation.
Or use unless you own it.
Yeah.
If I may, we pulled up the New York State law. It's not completely, well, it's not quoted accurately in the appellant's papers. Let me read it to you.
Yes, please.
Discharge a firearm within 500 feet, a longbow within 150 feet, a crossbow within 250 feet from a dwelling, house, farm building, or farm structure actually occupied or used, school building, school playground, public structure, or occupied factory or church.
Yeah.
Our rototiller is out there in our shed.
Lynn.
That was actually part of my attachment H, that I had that same law, but if you look at my, what I turned into you guys at 122.19, I had on there that I had actually measured it, and from their shooting pad, it was 508 feet to the property line. And that property line, the shed and the propane tank is farther in than from the property line, so they have it right.
So it's
I wheeled it right off.
Okay, thank you. What, is that number 9? 8. Somebody want
Well, the county unique natural area, 8. The problem is that the unique natural area designation only comes into play when there's a site plan review. So it's not, there's no site plan review.
Yeah, we know.
But we're, yeah. So, we're constrained to some degree that we can't change the laws. We have to interpret the laws as they're written. And if our interpretation is not what you want to hear, there's other avenues, the town board and so forth. But we really are doing our very best to consider this really carefully. And if it's, so we looked into the unique natural area and to see if we could apply that to this. And under the town law that we have, we can't. It's just that simple. So that's number 8. Number 9. The problem with the paragraphs 9 and the rest is that there's no particular law for us to consider with regard to these particular items.
Right, we said that in our appeal.
I understand. And
Yep, it's said right there.
it's just, there's nothing we can make a decision about. So it's not to say that
Yes, yes,
we're saying that you're wrong. We're just saying that for the purposes of this hearing, it's not something that we can consider.
agreed.
Okay. So, one of the things we did do was we looked very carefully at the both the regulations and what we could use as a reference. And the NFIP map of 2014 is clearly called for in town law number 9. And so we've considered that. And depending on what our vote is, we'll make some determination. But the determination is that the property is not a wetland, but it is in the floodplain area as defined by NFIP map of 2014, which is mentioned and given sway in town law of 2014. Yes.
Did you happen to read my opinion that you guys are reading that wrong?
We did.
Because it's not a designated flood zone if it's not labeled Zone A in this case, then it is not an official map.
Well, our interpretation is different.
That's fine.
And we've done some research, and so at this point, we feel that the NFIP map of 2014 is something that should be considered in making a decision.
Will you guys share that
Yes.
information that you
Yeah,
got?
everything is public.
Okay.
We have an enlarged map which shows the area where on Salmon Creek, where the Gun Club is located, is in a 1% floodplain. And we have a FEMA explanation of how to use the map and how it applies and where it applies that we're using as a guideline. So this is research that was done for us, that we did.
I have that same thing.
Well, it's up to interpretation. That's
Right.
what it is. Okay. Any other discussion? I need a motion to approve or deny the, I guess by point, and I can read this, I guess I'll go through the finding of facts before we do a motion. This is what we're working from, and we're going to read the pertinent paragraphs. With regard to the code enforcement officer, Jay, issued a building permit with the condition that no work may commence till the storm water plan is in place. The board has jurisdiction over appeal pursuant to Article 9 of the Stormwater Law of the Land Use Ordinance. After the filing of this appeal, a code enforcement officer instructed the LGRC that any further construction of the building permit I'm sorry, I'm going too fast. I'll go slower. After filing of this appeal, Code Enforcement Officer Day instructed the LRGC that further construction under the building permit is at LRGC's own risk. The Stormwater Law. The appeal alleges that the Code Enforcement Officer Day, in his capacity as the Stormwater Management Officer, failed to comply with provisions of the Stormwater Law prior to issuing the building permit. Article 9 of the Stormwater Law permits any aggrieved person to appeal any action or determination of the Stormwater Management Officer to the board by filing a written statement within 10 days of the delivery or filing. That's the law as it stands. So unfortunately, the appeal was filed on December 10th, 2018, which is more than 10 days from the issuance of the building permit. So we can't consider that paragraph.
Continuing with findings of fact relating to the land use ordinance and the appellant's claims or appeal regarding items there. The appeal alleges that the interpretation violates sections 1001.0, 1001.1, 1002.0, 1003.0, 1004.0, and 1007.0 of the land use ordinance. Going on per section, section 1001.0 of the land use ordinance permits non-conforming uses existing as of the date of the land use ordinance, which was first adopted on October 15th, 2003, and most recently amended March 18th, 2015. To continue. LRGC has operated a private sportsman's club with outdoor shooting at the property since the late 1950s or early 1960s. LRGC's non-conforming use is private sportsman's club with outdoor shooting without a special use permit, which it would need to become a conforming use in the residential agricultural district within which it lies. The land use ordinance does not further define shooting or otherwise distinguish between types of ammunition, firearms, bows, ranges, targets, etc. when defining club. Relocating shooting fields within an area used for private sportsman's club with outdoor shooting is a continuation of the same use. The proposed construction, including the shot fall danger zones, is in an area that has been used for some type of outdoor shooting activity, including archery, since the late 1950s or early 1960s. Pursuant to section 1001.1 of the land use ordinance, a non-conforming use of land may not be expanded or extended so as to occupy a greater area of land unless a variance has been granted. The proposed construction reduces the area LRGC uses for private sportsman's club with outdoor shooting, and therefore does not expand or extend the non-conforming use. Section 1002.0 of the land use ordinance permits the board to grant a variance for the expansion, extension, enlargement, replacement of, movement of, or addition to a non-conforming use or building. LRGC's non-conforming use of the property is private sportsman's club with outdoor shooting. The proposed construction does not expand, enlarge, extend, replace, move, or add to the footprint of that non-conforming use. Section 1003.0 prohibits a non-conforming use to change to another non-conforming use without a variance from the board. LRGC's non-conforming use of the property is private sportsman's club with outdoor shooting both before and after proposed construction. Section 1004.0 of the Land Use Ordinance states that a non-conforming building or part thereof that is damaged or destroyed may be restored to a safe and sanitary condition. Damaged non-conforming land or building that is determined to be unsafe or a hazard to public health or safety shall be subject to all other regulations of the town related to unsafe buildings. This section does not apply because the property is not non-conforming land. It is only LRGC's use of the property that is non-conforming. Furthermore, this section permits the reconstruction and repair of non-conforming buildings when they are damaged or destroyed, i.e. by fire, for example, unless the town's unsafe building laws require other action. It cannot be read so broadly as to require owners to remediate environmental impacts simply because they use their property for a lawful non-conforming use, especially when the land use ordinance places no such requirement on a conforming use. Section 1007.0 of the land use ordinance terminates non-conforming uses that have been abandoned or discontinued for 12 months. This section doesn't apply. LRGC has not ceased its non-conforming use of the property for 12 months.
And with respect to the floodplain law, Article 4, Section 1 of the floodplain law prohibits construction and other development in areas of special flood hazard without a floodplain development permit. Article 2, Section 7 defines area of special flood hazard to mean the land in the floodplain within a community subject to a 1% or greater chance of flooding in any given year. This may be designated as Zone A, AE, AH, A0, A1 through A30, A99, V, VO, VE, or V1 through 30. It is also commonly referred to as the base floodplain or 100-year floodplain. Article 3, Section 2 of the floodplain law also states in part that areas of special flood hazard are identified and defined on the maps and documents prepared by FEMA, including the NFIP Discovery Map, Seneca Watershed, April 2014, the NFIP map. According to a FEMA Region 2 Discovery meeting, Finger Lake Seneca Watershed meeting presentation dated May 6 through 14, 2014, the NFIP map shows potential loss in areas of risk from 1% annual flood by census block placed on HAZUS average annualized loss data. The NFIP map classifies the property, the subject property, as having 1,000, 10,000 in HAZUS average annualized loss data, AAL.
Yeah. Regarding the other matters on appeal, to the extent this board has jurisdiction over code enforcement officers' day's actions pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, the issuance of a building permit is a Type 2 action under 6 NYCRR paragraph 617.5 C25. Official acts of a ministerial nature involving no exercise of discretion, including building permits and historic preservation permits, where issuance is predicated solely on the applicant's compliance or non-compliance with the relevant local building or preservation codes. Next, to the extent that environmental conservation law paragraph 11-0931 is relevant to this appeal, and to the extent the board has jurisdiction over code enforcement officer days application of same, this board was not presented with evidence that the proposed construction would permit the discharge of a firearm within 500 feet from a dwelling, house, farm building, or farm structure actually occupied or used, school building, school playground, public structure, or occupied factory or church. To the extent that this board has jurisdiction over code enforcement officer days review of unique natural areas, consideration of unique natural areas under the land use ordinance is under 701.5.2 site plan requirements. To the extent the board has jurisdiction, there is no evidence in the record that the proposed construction is in a state or federal wetland.
Determinations on the appeal. So we're going through this point by point, and this is what the things that we've discovered and written down so that we have some marching orders in how to make a decision. Determination on the appeal. The board has reviewed and considered the record, which include, but is not limited to, written and oral submissions from the board, to the board from the appellant, code enforcement officer Day, LRGC, and the public, together with applicable law. The board finds that the appeal was filed more than 10 days after the delivery or filing of any actions or determinations taken pursuant to the stormwater law. The board denies and dismisses the portions of the appeal pertaining to the stormwater law based on an untimely appeal. The board affirms Code Enforcement Officer Day's zoning code interpretation on October 12th. Now, this is not our decision. I'm reading the text that we have to work from, and then we're going to vote on this. This is not our decision at this time. This is what we're working on. The board affirms Code Enforcement Officer Day's zoning code interpretation on October 12, 2018, stating that LRGC's use of the property was an existing non-conforming use, and the proposed construction did not require a site plan, special permit, or review of this board. The board determines that the NFIP map identifies land in a floodplain subject to a 1% or greater chance of flooding in any given year, and the property is therefore in an area of special flood hazard, as that term is used in the floodplain law. LGRC must obtain a floodplain development permit for the proposed construction. To the extent that this board has jurisdiction over Code Enforcement Officer Day's actions pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, the issuance of a building permit is a Type 2 action under New York State Law 6 NYCRR, paragraph 617.5C25. To the extent this board has jurisdiction over Code Enforcement Officer Day's adherence to environmental conservation law 11-0931, the proposed construction does not violate this provision of the law, and that is, to go back, that's the 500-foot sportsman's law. The extent that the board has jurisdiction over Code Enforcement Officers Day's review of unique natural areas at the property, consideration of unique natural areas under the land use ordinance was not required for the proposed construction. To the extent the board has jurisdiction, there is no evidence in the record that the proposed construction is in a state or federal wetland. Any discussion at all over what we just read? I'm going to call for a motion to approve or deny this with the, if there's an approval with the requirement for a permit to be obtained for floodplain construction.
I will so move, Mr. Chairman.
To approve or deny?
Approve.
Okay. Second?
I'll second that. And to be clear for the record, you're talking about approval of the draft resolution.
Yes.
That's before you.
That's correct. And what I just read was the draft resolution. Yes. And any further discussion about this? I'd like to say a couple of things. I really appreciate we all appreciate all of the effort that everyone has gone into, from the public, from the attorneys, from the code officer, from both the town attorney, Guy Crow, and from Paul and Laura. It's been a lot of work, and we've learned a lot in the process.
And I would just like to reinforce your point, and I think this is weighed heavy on all of us, that our responsibility is to follow the law as it's written. We can't make law. It puts us in a tough spot in a lot of ways when things like this come up, and it's not a decision that any of us takes lightly.
Okay, we're going to have a roll call vote. So Judy?
Aye.
Linda?
Aye.
Pete?
Aye.
I'm going to say aye.
Next question. Ask a question.
Yes.
To be clear, you're saying that it's okay, all they need to do is get a flood permit?
With the supporting engineering
Right.
together. Yes.
Or a floodplain permit,
Correct.
building permit.
And Chairman, if you will, the next step from a procedural standpoint is that the resolution should be filed in the town clerk's office within the next 5 business days, and a copy mailed to the appellant. And I would also suggest you send a copy to the gun club.
Will do, thank you. Now, we have another resolution to read, and then we're going to vote on it. And this is a recommendation to the town. This is a resolution from the board. Whereas members and guests of the Lansing Rod Gun Club have been shooting lead shot and into and over Salmon Creek and the adjacent wetlands since the late 1950s or early 1960s. Whereas LRGC entered into an administrative order on consent in 2016 with the United States Environmental Protection Agency, Region 2, the consent order to address LRGC's continued handling and disposal of lead shot. Whereas the consent order does not require the remediation of lead in Salmon Creek and the adjacent wetlands. Whereas, as noted in the consent order, lead pellets fired from a shotgun may break down into soluble lead compounds such as lead hydroxide and lead oxide, which may migrate into the groundwater and or surface water. This soluble lead poses a potential threat to human health and the environment through water contamination. And whereas lead shot continues to be used in the town of Lansing, now therefore be it resolved that the town of Lansing Zoning Board of Appeals hereby requests the Lansing Town Board to review and consider what actions the town of Lansing can take to address lead contamination in Salmon Creek and the adjacent wetlands.
I'd like to move that. I'll second.
Judy? Roll call vote. Judy?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to take my 3 minutes right here. I think that this is a good idea. But one of the things that this continues to point out is that lead's been a known hazard for decades. And I just feel that the Lansing Gun Club could have taken a little more leadership in this area, frankly. And I have a little tale to tell. My grandfather fished the streams here in the 1890s. When he died, the only thing he had that he kept all his life, at the age of 80-some, was his creel and his rod, which he used to fish here. He may have done some other things, maybe some of us are related. But in any case, I have to think about, you know, the history of sporting in my family and shooting. And I just can't think how our ancestors would feel about this situation right now. And I really think that as a town, all of the individuals, regardless of what side you find yourself on, need to come together and try to solve this problem, because this is clearly a very dangerous material that we're putting into our environment. So, and with that, I will say aye. Thank you. Unless there's any further business, I need a motion to close the closed the open and closed session.
I so moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much for your participation and attention.